Here we go. All right. This is the red successors. Okay. When mom and dad heard about the Dadzabao, they immediately suggested that I stay home from school for a few days. Since there were no classes, other students were staying home too. Nobody would connect my absence with the Dadzabao. As it turned out, I came down with a fever and stayed home for 10 days. I lay in bed all day and watched Grandma and Song Popo work around the house. I was too tired and too depressed to do any more than watch them and watch a patch of sunlight as it moved across the room. As the fever subsided, I began to feel better, but Grandma said I should stay home a few more days to make sure I was completely well. For the first time in my life, I was happy to miss school. Both Song Popo and Grandma tried their best to cheer me up. Song Popo combed my hair and made me treats. Grandma sat by my bed, took out my stamp collection, and tried to get me to take an interest in it. Finally, Grandma bought some lovely soft gray wool for me and taught me how to knit a sweater for Dad. I worked on it every day while the others were in school, but slowly, with many pauses, while I stared out the window. Why would anyone say such terrible things about me? Why did Yin Lan Lan and Du Hai hate me? What had I ever done to hurt them? I asked myself these questions again and again, but I never found an answer. Every day, Annie came to visit me, sometimes bringing me a bowl of sweet green bean soup from her grandmother. Every day she told me what was happening at school. Classes had started again. They were studying Chairman Mao's latest directives and related documents from the Central Committee. There would be one more month of school before graduation. Annie said that not many of our classmates had seen the Dadzabao about me, and there were now so many Dadzabao posted one on top of the other that no one was likely to find mine. Red Guards were everywhere. Since the newspapers had praised them as the pioneers of the Cultural Revolution, every high school and college had organized Red Guards to rebel against the old system. When the Central Committee had announced that Red Guards could travel free to other provinces to establish revolutionary ties with other Red Guards, Annie told me, our entire school had gone into an uproar. Most of the students had never been out of Shanghai, so this was terribly exciting news. A large crowd of students from our school had gathered outside the school committee offices and shouted nonstop, "We want to be Red Guards. We want to establish revolutionary ties." Only college and high school students were allowed to be Red Guards, but our school district had finally granted our school permission to establish the Red Successors. Just as the name indicated, the Red Successors were the next generation of revolutionaries, and when they were old enough, they would become Red Guards. 10 Red Successors were to be elected from each class. Annie brought me a note from Teacher Gu saying she hoped I was feeling better and would come back to school for the election on Saturday. Friday afternoon, a thunderstorm struck. The darkness gathered until I could not see my book. The first flash of lightning drew me to the window as the downpour began. I sat on a porcelain stool, leaning my forehead against the cool window pane. The torrent overflowed the gutters, and a curtain of rainwater leaped off the roof. Wind-blown spray blurred the window. The alley was washed clean. Dirt and trash were swept away by the flood. I stared at the downpour and pictured all the Dadzabao in the schoolyard. I opened the window and shivered with delight as the clean, chill air swept over me. A blast soaked my face and I laughed. From behind me, a hand reached out to pull the window shut. Grandma smiled down at me. She knew exactly what I was thinking. She gently wrapped my robe around my shoulders. I lay contentedly in her arms as the rain washed away my humiliation and shame. By morning, the storm had passed. When we got to school, we found that all the Dadzabao were gone. Sodden fragments littered the schoolyard, with only a few torn and illegible remnants dangling from the ropes. The paper with my name on it had disappeared. I sighed with relief and went to class feeling better than I had in a long time. During the time I was at home, summer had arrived. The windows of the classroom were all open, and the fragrance from the oleander bushes outside filled the air, heavy, rich, and warm. The classroom itself looked nicer. All the Dadzabao had been taken down and replaced by other things. A big color poster at least 6 feet by 3 feet hung in the middle of the back wall. It showed a big red flag with Chairman Mao's picture and a long line of people marching under the flag. On the right side of the room, the slogan, "Long live the great proletarian cultural revolution," covered almost the entire wall. I was cheered by the revolutionary atmosphere. Teacher Gu walked in and the election for the Red Successors began. I lowered my head and pretended to check my nails. I wanted someone to see that I did not care if I was chosen. My parents and grandma had warned me against disappointment, so I was prepared. And anyway, the red successors were not nearly as glorious as the red guards. Yujian, the chairman of our class, was the first one nominated. Then I heard my name called. My heart raced and I held my breath. I could hardly believe it. I was nominated. After everything that had happened, I was still regarded as somebody in the class. Now I could admit it to myself. I had never wanted anything as much as I wanted to win this election. I looked gratefully at the student who nominated me. Teacher Gu was about to write the names of all the candidates on the blackboard when Yin Lan Lan raised her hand. When the Red Guards were elected at my sister's school, the class status of candidates was taken into account. Shouldn't we do the same? Right. Those who don't have good class backgrounds shouldn't be elected, someone else agreed. My heart fell. Class status. There was that phrase again. At a loss for anything to say, I turned around and looked at Yu Jian. Yu Jian stood up without hesitation. My class status is office worker. But before liberation, my father used to be an apprentice. He had to work at the shop counter when he was in his teens, and he suffered all kinds of exploitation by the owner. My father is a member of the Communist Party now, and my mother will join pretty soon. All hands were raised to elect him a red successor. It was my turn now. My mind was blank. I did not know what to say. I stood up slowly, the back of my blouse suddenly soaked with sweat. My class status is also office worker. My father is an actor. I stumbled, trying to remember what Yu Jian had said. He is not a party member, and neither is my mother. And I don't know what else. I sat down. Jiang Ji Li, what is your father's class status? A loud voice asked. I slowly stood back up and looked around. Du Hai was staring at me. He sat sideways, one arm resting on the desk behind him. My father's class status? I did not see what Du Hai meant at first. You mean, what did my grandfather do? I don't know. I only know that he died when my father was 7. There was a trace of a grin on Du Hai's face. He stood up lazily and faced the class. I know what her grandfather was. He paused dramatically, sweeping his eyes across the class. He was a landlord. A landlord? The whole class erupted. What's more, her father is a rightist. A rightist? The class was in pandemonium. I was numb. Landlord? One of the bloodsuckers who exploited the farmers? The number one enemies, the worst of the 5 black categories? Even worse than criminals or counter-revolutionaries? My grandfather? And dad a rightist? None of the reactionary intellectuals who attacked the party one of the reactionary intellectuals who attacked the party and socialism? No, I could not believe it. You're lying. You don't know anything, I retorted. Of course I know, Du Hai smirked openly. My mother is the neighborhood party committee secretary. She knows everything. I could say nothing now. Through my tears, I could see everyone staring at me. I wished I had never been born. I pushed the desk out of my way and ran out of the classroom. Outside, it was so bright that I could barely see. Shading my eyes with my hand, I jumped blindly into the dazzling sunshine and ran home. Grandma was frightened by the tears streaming down my face. What happened, sweetie? Are you hurt? She put her spatula down and grasped my hand, asking again and again. At first, I couldn't answer. Finally, still sobbing, I managed to tell her what had happened. It isn't true, is it? I sobbed. Grandpa wasn't a landlord, was he? Dad isn't a rightist, is he? Of course your father's not a rightist. Don't listen to your classmates, Grandma said immediately, but she sounded nervous. And Grandpa wasn't a landlord either, right? I looked straight into Grandma's eyes. Grandma heaved a sigh and hugged me to her chest. Whatever he was, it doesn't have anything to do with you. He's been dead for over 30 years. It was true then. Grandpa was a landlord. I did not want to listen anymore. I turned away. When I opened my eyes the next morning, Dad was standing by the bed. Get up, Ji Li. I'm taking the 3 of you for a walk. He patted my cheek. I don't feel like going. I rolled over and faced the wall, my eyes swollen and my head heavy and aching. You must come. I have something to tell you, he said gently but firmly. Ji Yong and Ji Yun each took one of Dad's hands while I listlessly followed. Mom and Dad had spent a long time talking in the bathroom last night, the only place in our home where they could have a private conversation. And I was sure this walk had something to do with what happened to me yesterday.